All right, everybody. Welcome back to another Monday, which is probably the best day of the week now that we get together every week. But I need to know if you can hear me and if you can see me. I always appreciate everybody in the chat letting me know, and that way we can have a good experience here. Obviously, there's a lot of things to talk about. We're going to go over some, domestic information as well as international information and just try to be better prepared for what's happening. I'm seeing 5x5s coming through. Exile Reviews, thanks for being here. I'm seeing Mr. Landfill, thank you so much. Jeremy Taylor, Lefty GR. We got Harbor Prepper, Isaac Haney. Good to go. Everybody says we are good, except for Gregor Zamino, who says 2x4. So I have a feeling that's just rough. We're not coming through as well as we would like. But that being said, welcome back to Marauder Monday, which is what we call things here in case you're new around here on Mondays. And man, we just have a lot to talk about, okay? And there's so much things happening now that we have to constantly remind ourselves as to what we need to be monitoring, as well as how we can better adapt to the current situation, right? So let's do what we can to be better prepared. And every day, at least in my opinion, you should be doing something to set yourself apart from the next person, because it's an unfortunate truth of preparedness, but being more prepared than somebody else really does increase your chances of survival. So being more prepared than other people makes you have a better chance to survive, right? So let's see what we can do every day if you can. And if you start to get burnt out or you get tired, just take a break. It's not going to be the end of the world, or is it? But honestly, you need to take a break sometimes. So don't burn yourself out. You do get diminished returns if you push yourself so hard that you no longer have the energy to move forward. So keep that in mind. But here we are. Good to see everybody. And I want everyone here to do their best during this current crisis we're all facing. So let's see what we can do. Now, tonight, we're talking about a few things. And obviously, the title is No One is Coming to Save You. And I think we've learned some things recently that remind us that there is not really a reason to believe that there's some kind of large authority body that can come in and save the day at any point in time, just because somebody said they could at some point in time. We used to have that kind of belief, but not any longer. And that is kind of one of the issues that we are facing now. Things are not necessarily where they need to be, okay? Now, first things first, okay? We have some stuff going on here in the United States that threatens both you and I in the sense of what we can do legally and what we have constitutional access to, and yet it continually keeps moving towards somebody trying to take that away from us. So we need to touch base on that so that we can then move into the next part of the conversation, which is why we can't relay, or basically why we can't rely on people in all forms of authority to come to save us. We're not going to be saved by everyone. And in fact, there's not enough first responders on the entire planet to save every single person. So this idea, this belief that has permeated through society for years and years, that you can just pick up the phone, hit 911, and you're going to be saved, is just unreasonable at this point. It's no longer a reality. In fact, all you're really doing is reporting your own demise, and then that way they can hopefully figure out what happened after the fact. But we're watching that happen, and we're seeing reports of such activity right now to where you should really be concerned and really be self-reflecting on whether or not you're prepared to be that person in that situation, because you can't assume someone else is going to walk in and do it for you. Now, let's see here. Ron Reno, I'm pretty sure I already said Marauders, but we can say it again because, I just did, so we're good to go. Now, what are we talking about tonight? Well, first and foremost, we have everything everybody already knew was happening is happening, and that is the U.S. House panel considering the assault weapons ban next week. Great. Awesome. Just what we need right now. Because, there's nothing else important to focus on in the country. There's nothing else worth taking a look at. There's nothing else that we really need to fix. So let's look at something that's not going to have any actionable ability to fix some of the issues that they're claiming are why this needs to exist. And then also just hurt people like you and I in the sense of what we can or cannot own or can or cannot have access to, right? So they're trying to push this up now to Friday saying that they're going to try to get this pushed through the House, which will then eventually go to the Senate, where it will likely fail due to the fact that it would need 60 votes in order to pass. However, I don't trust anybody in our government any longer to hold up anything that is based on constitutionality. And that's exactly where we are at this point in time. And maybe the Supreme Court would eventually come in and say that, no, this is not constitutional, but that's a process. And that process takes time. And during that time of the process, things get very dicey. And that's exactly what we're going to be looking at here if any of this goes through. And although most of the analysts out there that would look at this and say, analysts, what's wrong with me? I don't know how to talk tonight. Those people would look at this and say it's already dead in the water, right? It's not going to get through because they don't have the votes for it in the Senate. But I just can't count on that at this point in time. There's so many people that are so backwards anymore when it comes to what they believe in or what they vote with in the sense of their ideology or their personal beliefs that I could see something like this maybe getting further than we expected. And so we should always be prepared to see our own government take steps that takes our ability to be prepared away from us. And that is exactly what this is, okay? So this is coming up. The committee's meeting on Wednesday to mark up the bill, right? And they're trying to get everything ready to go in the sense of taking away assault weapons. Now, there's a lot that you need to understand when it comes to this. The bill, if enacted, would allow the sales of such weapons that are already lawfully possessed and would not apply to antique, manually operated, or certain hunting and sporting firearms, the panel said. Most of that's crap. It's not necessarily accurate because the people who comment on these bills that are trying to push them through don't usually read the whole thing and really don't have any idea about what they're talking about. But this is what they're trying to push through. And of course, this happened back in, I believe, 1994, lasted for 10 years. And then luckily it was allowed to go away and phase out. But here's why you guys need to be aware of this. And it's because we're all preppers. So the majority of us are armed in the sense of having equipment for self-defense. And a lot of that equipment's based on modern platforms that make sense and give you good capability. So all of us, in my opinion, are likely to be affected by this if it was to go through overnight, possibly turning you into a criminal, which I'm not a big fan of. But here's what you need to know in regards to what's in that bill. So you can really be aware of exactly what some of this language looks like and why this is going to pertain to the next part of our conversation, which is about how no one's here to save you. The people aren't coming to save you. They're not going to protect you. And at the same time, they're going to take away your ability to do what you have to do yourself. Okay. So the definitions of this bill are what we need to pay attention to. Okay. So here's what they like to define things as. And this is why you need to be concerned about what they're trying to accomplish here. The term semi-automatic assault weapon. So they're creating these terms out of nomenclature, and then they're applying definitions to them that allow them to be more, let's just say, strict with their legislation against certain types of firearms. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here. This means any of the following, regardless of country of manufacture or caliber of ammunition, except a semi-automatic rifle that has the capacity to utilize a magazine that is not fixed and does not have any one of the following: a pistol grip, a forward telescoping or detachable stock, blah, 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 a grenade launcher, a barrel shroud, or a threaded barrel. Okay. Now, any of those items is likely to be equipped to just about every modern sporting rifle, right? Which I don't even like that term, MSR. Let's be honest. These are what they are. They're weapons, and they're made to protect us with, and they're made to protect ourselves with, and they're made to deal with those who also have weapons. Okay, so they are what they are. I don't care if you think that's the wrong way to say it or whatever, define it, because somebody might get mad. I don't give a crap about that. So what I'm trying to say is that this opens up a lot of leeway into what can or cannot be banned. I don't know about you, but my Ruger 1022, it's semi-automatic. It has a detachable magazine and it has a threaded barrel. So therefore, it is a semi-automatic assault weapon according to this particular, literature. So keep that in mind. We're talking about a Ruger 1022 here, okay? There you go. Now, a semi-automatic rifle that has a fixed magazine with the capacity to accept more than 10 rounds, except for a tubular device, okay? So they're okay with maybe an old school, I think it's like the Marlins that have the tubular magazine feed, but they aren't okay with anything that has a capacity that can accept more than 10 rounds, even if it's fixed. Okay, so if you have a fixed magazine that's locked and blocked inside of your, M14 or your AR-15 or whatever it is, and it can hold 20 rounds, well, now you're still screwed on that. Okay, now keep this in mind. This is the part you really need to pay attention to, because they're also concerned about something that a lot of us have, and that is a semi-automatic pistol. Now, the whole AR pistol thing has been an issue back and forth, especially with the ATF creating arbitrary rules that don't go through any type of committee or legislation or legislative process, and then come in and say you can or can't have something, right? So now they're trying to define exactly what they're not cool with. And this is an issue because we all know that most of us own these types of firearms, okay? It has a capacity to utilize a magazine that is not fixed and has one of the following: a threaded barrel, okay? A second pistol grip, a barrel shroud, the capacity to accept a detachable magazine at some location outside of the pistol grip. So like a magazine well, aka what's in front of the pistol grip on most of your AR pistols, a semi-automatic version of an automatic firearm, which riddle me that, because every single Glock is a semi-automatic version of a Glock that could be a full auto, right, in many ways. And then we have the manufacturer weight of 50 ounces or more when unloaded, right, of course. And then we have the stabilizing brace or similar component. So all these things are being put out there to try to clamp down on our ability to own some of these devices. And this is ridiculous. It probably won't pass, but I'm still upset that it even exists. And we're getting to the point where these people can't fix our problems. They can't fix inflation. They can't fix the, foreign affairs that are occurring throughout the world right now. They can't fix the supply chain. They can't fix our healthcare system. They can't fix anything. They haven't done anything valuable in a very long time. But they're going to try to still take your guns away because, they can try to do that, at least, I guess. Show me a track record of success, and maybe I'll start buying into some of the things you're trying to do. But as of right now, all you do is fail at everything. And then you're going to actually try to piss off everybody who is in the country that's already ticked off at you. This isn't going to last very long if things keep going in this direction. And if a bill like this were to actually pass, I'd be very concerned about how most people in the country would react to it. And here's one thing you have to keep in mind. If we find ourselves in a situation where every prepper that's a firearm owner is out there and dealing with this kind of stuff and having to weigh out the ability to protect themselves or become possibly a felon overnight or whatever it will be, you're going to have mass non-compliance on a countrywide level. And once you have mass non-compliance with the law, you technically have without rule of law in many ways. And that puts us in a dangerous place, even if it's people like us who are the reason behind it. So don't ever conflate the idea that non-compliance can only be from one side of the ideology or another, okay? Just because something's unconstitutional doesn't mean it can't be put into a law and eventually create problems for us until it gets fixed on the judicial level. But I needed everyone to be aware of that because that's where we are heading. This is ridiculous. And so yeah, Minuteman 69, that Marlin Model 60, you better watch out, okay? You are a problem with that semi-automatic assault weapon, which they have now tried to define so that there is a reason to use that kind of nomenclature on things that we all know is crap. That is an issue. And one of the reasons that's an issue, and one of the reasons why I made the thumbnail I made tonight and used the title I made tonight for this live stream is because no one's coming to save you. And we know what happened in Uvalde. We know exactly what was in the report that was given out to the public about the failures on the law enforcement level there. And we know exactly what to expect if we find ourselves in a very widespread emergency situation. We can't expect people to come save us when an obvious situation that has an exact target is handled the way it was there in Uvalde. That should tell you that you need to take all of these things into your own hands. You might live somewhere like I do, where your police force is a big part of the community and does what they can to get involved. And I have every ounce of faith that the police department here in my town would react properly to a situation like this 100%. I have no doubt about that. And I am not here to try to bash law enforcement as a whole by bringing up this scenario. But this is a reminder that even if you call 911 and even if the police show up to try to save you or protect you or to save others who are now in a dangerous situation, there's no guarantee they're going to actually do it. There's no guarantee they'll be able to do it. And the fact that people walk around oblivious to the idea that anything that could happen will easily be resolved by 911 not being true should tell you that most people are still going to operate under this mantra. So you need to do what you have to do to take things into your own hands when it comes to your self-preservation. And when I say self-preservation, that encompasses everything from self-defense to medical, first aid, and everything in between that you would experience during a crisis like this one. And there is a lot of failure that happened here. And I'm not here to try to dog on law enforcement, like I said. I'm not here to even backseat driver or, armchair quarterback this whole scenario either. Because here's the thing. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not professionally trained to react to these scenarios. So anything I'd be saying would just be speculatory and opinion based on what I feel might have had to happen or should have happened. But none of that has a professional background to it. So I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is that you have to be ready to understand that if this situation happens where you are and there's law enforcement involved, there's still no guarantee they're going to come in and take care of what needs to be done. There's a lot of things that happen here that I am not aware of personally that I might not have access to in the sense of information ever, that might change some of the thought process about, what these failures were and why they occurred. But all you really need to understand about this scenario is that those people were not saved by the police in any decent amount of time. And so if you're one of the people who were affected by this tragedy, well, it would have been on you to take care of what happened there. Okay. So I wanted to bring that up because here we are trying to ban our access to assault weapons. I'm saying that with quotations because we all know that's crap, but they're trying to ban access to firearms for people like you and I. And when I detailed the whole conversation about semi-automatic pistols, obviously they're targeting AR and AK pistols and things of that nature. But you have to understand that literature right there described even my Sig Sauer P320 because it has a threaded barrel and a detachable magazine, right? So I have a semi-automatic pistol that's an issue when it comes to having a threaded barrel, right? Well, the threaded barrel is obviously used for many different applications, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter because I own it and there's no reason not to. But that's what they're trying to target, like literally everything. It's not just about, AR-15s and things of that nature. Like they're putting a stamp on just about everything. Now, I will say in that literature, they actually exempt Ruger Mini 14s and Mini 30s specifically by name. And I'm like, they just keep rolling with the whole California doctrine when it comes to, semi-automatic rifles, I guess. If it looks like a hunting rifle, then I guess it's fine. So whatever. But that's not, me telling anybody you should go get a Mini 14 or a Mini 30. What I am telling you is that you better hang on to your ARs and then your AKs and everything else. And then I expect you to hang on to them, even if they say we're not supposed to anymore. That's just what I expect. Now, here's what else I want to say. Okay. This whole thing is a tragedy and it's horrible. And we have to look at this in a way that shows us what to expect. Okay. Don't take your personal responsibility and put it into anyone else's hands. This should teach you that. This scenario should teach you that. There's a lot of questions around this scenario that I might have. There's a lot of things I don't know that might have happened. Okay. But at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway from this as preppers and people who want to be prepared is that we cannot rely on other people to solve our problems for us. Please don't do that. And a great example of that, okay, because like I said, I'm not here to just bash on law enforcement. We're not going to do that because every department's different and everybody has a different level of charisma and gumption and bravery. And I don't expect to see that same type of response from every single police department. But I mean, I don't know if you guys remember the Parkland situation in Florida, but there was a lot of similarities there about how the police reacted, right? So I think we have to at least keep in mind that there's a possibility that they're not going to be there for us when we need them, okay? Now, sometimes we are the ones who are there to save people. And it's sometimes ourselves, but in the process, we save others as well. This just happened in Indiana. And a good Samaritan took care of somebody who was trying to create a similar tragic event. Basically, this shooter came in with a rifle at the mall and started shooting. And luckily, somebody there was a concealed carry holder and pulled their firearm and eliminated the threat. And a lot of people died. I believe 4 people died. And a lot of people were injured, including a 12-year-old girl. But without that good Samaritan, without that bystander, who knows how many people would have perished in this event. This person knew that it wasn't anyone else's responsibility but their own to protect their own life and possibly defend others if this scenario was to occur. Now, I don't know much about who this person was or anything along those lines. But what I can say is that this is a great example of how everybody needs to be looking at what is happening in our country right now. Our future looks like more of this stuff. I'm sorry to say it, and I don't like it, and I don't want that to be the case. People are unhinged, okay? The crisis of 2020 has pushed people over the edge, financially and mentally, and we are going to see more of these tragedies happening around the country. And no matter how much gun control ever gets put into place, this is going to keep happening, okay? So it is you who has to make the decision to do what you can to be that first line of defense and that first responder to any scenario that's occurring, all right? And the police here, they praised the Good Samaritan. They said, yep, thank God that person was here. They were the one who was on the scene before we could get there, and they handled it and took care of what needed to happen in order to save lives. So it's a 22-year-old man, okay? Here's what I want you to understand. That means he can only legally own that handgun for a year. Now, in some states, you can have a handgun if you're 18, if your parent bought it for you and stuff like that. There's a lot of little caveats there. But in general, most states, it's 21 years old for you to buy a handgun. So this person may have bought a handgun a year before, maybe did a small amount of training, and got their concealed carry permit and started carrying it lawfully, and in 1 year's time had to pull it out and use it to defend lives, their life and the lives of others. I mean, that's crazy. And I hope that person is able to get through this without any, mental scars and everything that comes with taking somebody's life, no matter what the situation. But I applaud them for taking these responsibilities into their own hands. And I thank them for helping to save many other lives, because we need more of that here in our country now. We need to rely on each other. What we saw in Uvalde shows us all that, yeah, law enforcement does play a part, and we need them in many, many ways. But you better not count on them to take care of every single problem that arises. And when these problems start to come in more than one wave at a time, aka if you start having active shooters in the same town in different locations, that's it. Law enforcement is either going to have to choose one or the other. They generally were spread too thin already before even having to deal with that. Who are you going to be in that moment, and where are you going to be in that moment? Those are all things you have to keep in mind. So now we talked about how they're trying to put in more gun control. They want to get rid of ARs. They want to get rid of, AKs, and they want to get rid of AR pistols and all that stuff, right? And I tell them to shove it because I'm sick of it. Like, you can't even run the country. The country's falling apart. People are losing their minds. The economy's in the garbage, and we're almost on the edge of World War III. And you're over here trying to tell me, law-abiding citizen that pays my taxes and does all my stuff, that I shouldn't have access to an AR-15. Okay, shove it. But at the end of the day, that's where we're at, because you know what? They know that we are going to get desperate and become more and more difficult to control. And it's not the people who are doing these tragic instances that they're worried about. It's not those people, because they're trash. Those people are human garbage, okay? But they're worried about us, because they know that when regular people, law-abiding people, good people get pushed too far, they might eventually say that's enough. And we're kind of done with the way things are going right now. I'm sick of you, right? And that's what's concerning them the most. So don't get this twisted as it's for us and for our protection. It's literally for them and their protection. And I'm going to prove that to you here right now. But first, let's jump in the chat for a second, okay? Let's see. The Rios 7018 took the words right out of my mouth, MP 100. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad we're on the same page. I don't expect everyone here to agree with everything I say. Please don't ever assume that, because I want everyone here to be free thinking and to have their own opinions. And what we should be doing is having a conversation and developing well-rounded opinions based on other people's experience. And I think that's how you really open your mind up to being better prepared and being better at planning and everything else. But here's the thing. We are all preppers. So we have that commonality, which means we think about things a little bit differently. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine who helped me build my shooting range about how, as preppers, like, we just think a little different about stuff. When I look at a tall tower, that's surrounded by barbed wire fence, I look at that as a strategic location, whereas most people just look at it as some building, right? These are just things that we consider. And as preppers, we have to be on that same page with each other, because it is what it is, okay? Now, let's see. Well, Northern Girl Hobbies is here. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Let's see. I'm trying to see, get back in the chat for a second. Brian Barbie says, if a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so, right? And I think that we're all starting to feel that. And interestingly enough, and T-Rex having my own shooting backdrop, it's amazing. I can't even believe it. I was out there today. And by the way, guys, I don't know about that Kimber. I'm just going to throw it out there. And I told you guys I have an affinity for the brand, but it was not playing nice today. That's all I can say. I'll wait till I get some kind of official response on it from them before I make any decisions, but I'm not very happy. And I already knew some of the problems that company has, but oh my God. Okay, so anyway, now let's move on. Why are they trying to disarm us, and why aren't they coming to save us at the same time? And like I said, I really need to caveat this. Like, I have interacted with my local police here in my town, and they're great. I have no issues with them at all. I can understand their approach. They take a community approach. And honestly, I have every bit of faith that if something were to happen in my town, they'd be there. We've even discussed those exact scenarios occurring here and how they know, based on the size of our town and their force, that they aren't necessarily 100 men deep. So if that was the case, they know that they could try to even use people like myself to help them in a situation if ever came down to it. And so I think that's a great piece of networking that I was able to put together, but it's also something that I'd be more than willing to do because I know they would come to help me if I needed it. And to be honest with you, I don't even necessarily live in their jurisdiction because I'm one of those weird backcountry county folk that live off a dirt road. So there's that. But let's go ahead. Savage Lee says 45 ACP is touchy. Look, man, not like this. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay. Now, Laura L. I did see that clip, and I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. We are definitely in a phase where people are ballsy. I don't know how else to say it. Maybe I could have said confident or whatever, but they're taking more risks to accomplish whatever goal they have, and they don't care who they take with them. And we're seeing that blatant open crime happening throughout our urban areas right now. It's starting to bleed out into the suburban areas, and I'd be watching out if I was anyone in a rural environment because activity out here is harder to track, and you can find evidence of people being places they weren't necessarily supposed to be, no matter whether or not you had a no trespassing sign posted. That's all I'm going to say on that. Now, let's see here. Let's jump into why they're trying to do this, okay? And how they're trying to protect themselves. It's not you, it's not I. They're taking away guns to protect themselves, and they're not showing up to protect us because it's just us, right? Well, let's talk about why. So, here's some information that I found interesting. I might actually make a standalone video about this because it needs to be a little bit more scrutinized, okay? But here's what's going on. So Congressman Adam Schiff, not my favorite. It looks like he's from A Bug's Life, but he wants to block congressional oversight for certain deployments in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, right? This is how they pass the budget for the military basically every year, okay? Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here that basically says they put an amendment in here, which is Amendment 477, I believe. Or it might be 447. Either way, we'll talk about that here in a second where we'll actually look at the real amendment. But it's basically saying that the military is not allowed to collect evidence against civilians. And if they do, then it will be tossed out before being submitted to a court, right? So basically, if we found ourselves under like martial law or the military was being used in an improper manner and it was going against the Posse Comitatus Act, which is basically saying the military can't operate as law enforcement within American soil or within our borders, that, any evidence they collect when doing that illegal activity would have to be thrown out. Now, in many ways, I would agree with this whole amendment. I'd be like, well, yeah, okay. They're not supposed to be used as law enforcement. And if they're acting as law enforcement unconstitutionally or illegally, then I would be okay with the idea of them not being able to submit the evidence against us during that time, right? Well, we all know that for the people, if we were to interact with the military in that kind of a negative manner, a lot of times it would be in a martial law style scenario where then you have, military tribunal courts and everything else regarding martial law that isn't necessarily going to make it to the domestic court anyway. So you start looking at this a little bit more side-eyed. And of course, there's a lot of just concepts being discussed within this article about it. But here's what I want you to keep in mind, okay? And we will go ahead and do a quick look here at, okay, Amendment 447. So I'm going to read it to you directly. And this is why you need to pay attention to what's being put into these budget bills that is hidden like a snake in the grass, okay? Because this is how they get us, and this is how they're going to do things, okay? 447. Prohibits the use of evidence obtained by or with the assistance of a member of the armed forces in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act in a court or other legal proceeding. Okay? Now, you might say, well, yeah, Magic, and I agree with you. I think this is good because we don't want to be prosecuted, under martial law or something like that about things that we weren't necessarily doing wrong. So this eliminates their ability to collect evidence against us if they ever took us to court. That sounds good and feels good to say, right? Okay. Now, here's what we need to talk about, okay? Okay. This whole situation, who do you think it protects, all right? Who in this live chat, all right? And you guys don't have to say, because I like when you do like #yes or something like that. It's just kind of fun. But I want you to think about this, okay? When it comes to our government failing, when it comes to corruption, when it comes to things not going the direction we want them to go, a lot of people have said, well, luckily, the military still backs the Constitution. And luckily, the military has our back. And a lot of those types of conversations have occurred, which in general, I would agree with, okay? I think there is obviously exceptions to any rule. But in general, I agree with you that, okay, some point, the military might be the only option, okay? So who do you think this really protects? Because like I said, if we were in martial law, there's not really a chance that you or I are going to get a fair trial per se. You can be jailed indefinitely during martial law. You can have a quick military court ruling against you because there's no domestic law operating any longer during those circumstances. But what this does is protects civilians, right, from any kind of military persecution. And that should tell you that this is actually for those who are currently in the government to protect themselves from evidence being collected against them by the military if that scenario were to ever unfold. This is being put into this budget bill as an idea to protect you and I in case things like Portland happen, where we sent, federal agents into Portland where they weren't necessarily supposed to be. And you send the National Guard in at DC to protect the Capitol. And, they're enforcing laws and collecting evidence that they shouldn't necessarily be doing, right? I don't buy it. I honestly think that this is for protecting the people who know they're already doing something wrong. And that if the military ever had to fully step in and actually deal with some of these corrupt people within the government, this is a level of protection they're trying to create for themselves in order to not have that evidence submitted into a court thereafter. This is just my theory, but it's something I want you to keep in mind because I don't believe anything is being done with you or I in mind any longer. Okay, we are in a really bad situation with our government, and we're in a really bad situation with our economy. And on the global stage, we're just a joke at this point. And half the country felt that way about Trump during 2016 to 2020, right? Half the country did. They thought that made us look bad. You know what? The personality of the person doesn't matter as much as the level of respect they're given by foreign adversaries, okay? And regardless of how you felt about that president, we didn't have the problems we're having right now during that time, and that is a fact. So you tell me exactly how you think things are going right now, and then try to blame them on 4 years ago rather than on what's happening right now, okay? And then also try to point out any level of competency within our current government that you can actually brag about based on what we're doing, because everything is terrible, okay? I'm sorry, I'm not being pessimistic tonight. I'm upset because all of this keeps happening. And I've predicted this in many ways, but I'm upset about it still. It's not like I want any of this to happen, but it's predictable because they're on this path to try to control us and at the same time protect themselves. And we're just suffering at the bottom while this all goes on. AKA people are dying in public events and areas because we're not protecting them, but then they're turning around and pointing the finger at you and I for being the problem. And that is exactly how this whole thing is going to keep going until something changes, all right? Now, C-Baby says, we the people who are not taking it no more. And, I get it. And I'm not trying to sound the alarm or anything like that. All I'm trying to do is make everybody here really think critically about what's going on. And you guys let me know in the chat here, but do you think that amendment in the NDAA for 2023 is for you and I's protection, or do you think it's for their protection? Because it makes sense to me that they would find a way to protect themselves, or at least have some legal standing of protection before something happens that might oust them for what they really are. That's just my thought. Okay. All right. Now, RL. I'm not necessarily pissed. I'm a little worked up. I'm a little fired up. And, I got out and I got to shoot at my own shooting range on my own property today, and that felt great. But you know what didn't feel great? Slicing my left hand's trigger finger, which is only a trigger finger sometimes because I'm a right-hand shooter. But you gotta train with both, let's be honest. But I sliced it wide open on my shot timer of all things before I started shooting at all, because the belt clip on those dang packed club timers is really sharp. Be careful of that. Ow. Now, okay. Vision preparedness is always for them. They don't give a crap about us. And I try not to curse too often if I don't have to, just because some people leave this on while they're hanging with their families. I get it. But you know what? I also have the angry prepper on here sometimes. So it is what it is, right? Now, let's talk about other things that are happening here in the country, and how they're trying to save us, but it's not us they're trying to save. Let me explain this one for you. So we had the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen about to go on strike today. It was supposed to happen today, okay? And they were going to stop operating trains throughout the country, all right? This was going to be huge. 57,000 U.S. rail employees were ready to go on strike, like literally today. You know what that would do to our already strained and broken supply chain? It would be a disaster, okay? So this was all supposed to happen, and the cool-off period ends July 18th, right? So what happened? Well, let's talk about how they tried to save us again from this broken supply chain, okay? So the administration intervenes in a railroad contract fight to block the strike, okay? They blocked the strike for at least 60 days by naming a board of arbitrators to intervene in the contract dispute, averting action that could have disrupted all kinds of shipments, okay? This will keep 115,000 rail workers on the job while the arbitrators develop a set of contract recommendations for both sides to consider. Now, they moved it down the road 60 days. Okay, 60 days from now is what, September 18th, all right? Okay, here's what I want everyone to keep in mind. This isn't because they're going to fix the problem. This isn't because they have answers or solutions, okay? We need these train operators to keep operating trains. You and I need this. We literally do. We are screwed if the trains shut down and if the trucks stop driving and the logistics system just quits because it's not worth it anymore for anybody, which is a lot of what it's coming down to. Well, honestly, without the trains moving, we're screwed in a lot of ways, okay? Here's the thing. This isn't for you or I. This isn't to save the supply chain. This isn't to keep us afloat. This isn't to help us economically or to get us out of inflation or to raise the supply in order to meet the demand, which would then make the cost of living more affordable, especially in regards to food products and whatnot. This is literally for the midterm election, okay? So they're doing this, they're pushing it down the road 2 months further so that if for some reason they can't actually come to an agreement and this strike actually happens, the effects of it won't be felt until right after the midterm cycle, okay? So these things are all being done strategically and they're pre-planned because there is no one in this administration right now that can actually fix these problems. They are literally saying really dumb stuff all the time. The Department of Transportation Secretary Buttigieg basically said, if you don't like the gas prices, get an electric car, right? I mean, those are the solutions that are being offered at this point in time. And I am not some diehard political fiend that is going to sit here and bash everything happening on the left just because they're the ones in charge right now. I'm bashing them because they're in charge right now, and their job is to make these things not affect us in the way that they have been. And they're only getting worse. And they're just kicking the can down the road with this strike, they're not actually going to fix it. There's a lot of talk in this article about how they may come to a compromise and what they're going to do to try to alleviate some of the strain and all that crap that they're just going to say. But in reality, they bought themselves 60 days because these people in this brotherhood of railroad engineers and trainmen were more than willing to go on strike literally today. They would have done it today. 95% of them said yes to it. Okay. Or was it 99.5? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher, honestly. Let's see here. It was, hold on. I know I saw it here in one of the first parts of the article. Oh, no, that was the last article, and I already closed it out. But either way, it was a huge majority of these train workers that were willing to do this. So be prepared for logistics to get disrupted in 60 days, okay? And if they don't, great. But you know what? Things are getting tough, man. They're getting really tough, all right? So what else is happening? Well, because of things like these logistics issues and everything else that's going on right now, the world is facing a food shortage at an alarming level. Now, tell me something I don't know, right? But this is a reminder that these other alternative news outlets are coming out and writing opinions. Joshua Smith, July 15th, 2022, from Spinnaker, right? They basically said, look, like, this is getting really bad, okay? They can't even, like, hide it anymore. They're at the point now where they are just talking about it through opinion pieces saying, this is getting so bad. And this guy, Joshua Smith, I doubt he's some kind of prepper or conspiracy theorist or somebody who spends all their time on the internet looking for reasons to why things are going so badly right now. This is probably just a journalist who is just observing their surroundings and going, wait a second. And that's probably what a lot of people are doing right this second around the world, are seeing these things happening and saying, what is going on? What's going to happen and where are we heading? And the answer to that question is scary in many ways. But it's all tied in here. We all already know that these third world countries and these developing countries are all stressing the most right now. And they are in a serious food crisis. In the Middle East and Africa are facing levels of unrest due to this food crisis. Do not be fooled for a second that this can't happen in the United States just because we have fancy this, fancy that. Things can happen here very quickly in the same way. So I'm always watching what's going on in other parts of the world because I expect them to possibly happen here one day. Even if they never do, I can at least live with that expectation so I won't be surprised or caught off guard if it ever occurs. I really needed some of that. You know that. Now, real quick. Let's see. RW says AP, since he retired, is getting big. I'm going to go with, we're talking about Angry Prepper on that one. And I know he's been working out and doing like a fitness channel. So might just be bulking up big time. And that's just how it goes, man. Let's see here. Don Wells says the whole world is going to hell in a handbasket. And you know what? That cliche might not be more properly used than right now, right? So that is just how things are. Let's see here. Carl Miller says Angry Prepper and his hipster jeans. You know, don't hate on hipster jeans because, you know, I watch T-Rex Arms and you know what? They have quality training content and they will teach you how to shoot rifles and they can wear whatever jeans they want because I know they'll outshoot me any day of the week. So everyone do whatever they do, right? Now, Kim's Rural Life, Germany telling people to burn wood for winter heat. That is an issue, okay? And you know what? You better have some wood stored away in Germany. So there's some talk right now about what's going on with Russia and the Nord Stream 1 pipeline because Russia is doing the maintenance right now where it's shut down and they might not ever turn it back on. So that is a concern that Europe is having. And Russia just made some bold claims about their legal ability to shut resources off to all of Europe if they feel the need to do so. So we're going to talk about that here in a second. But one thing I wanted to mention is that I believe that this concept is correct, and I want everyone to be aware of it, okay? So, is inflation creating a normal of, or a new normal of high food prices? Here's what we need to keep in mind. It takes a very long time for things to catch back up. This article talks about how we're dealing with a lot of different versions of inflation at the same time, and how food prices are likely never going to go back to being the same again. In many ways, I agree. because right now people are paying for food either way. And the amount of time it'll take for these commodities to make it back to the levels they were at during 2019, let's say, and get back to being affordable, well, that amount of time might not even exist at this point because demand is never going down, but the supply is what has to catch up. And the only way it can catch up is if people can't afford food to the point where they're not buying it, which means that the supply has a chance to, refill. But the issue there is that if people can't afford food and can't get the food, that means that people are literally starving. And that's not going to work very well now, is it? So this whole article is about how we are seeing price increases and more are coming, right? So people of all incomes are increasingly wary of price hikes still to come. The cost of groceries has surpassed the price of gasoline as the top inflation concern among Americans, according to a poll released last month, with 90% of respondents troubled by rising food prices. And that's because gas is more manageable. Yeah, I hate paying gas right now. I have to decide if I'm going to go do things I want to do because of how expensive gas is right now. But I can just not drive as much. I can go just to the grocery store and back instead of running other kinds of errands, right? I can go to my doctor appointment if I have to. I don't have to go do the fun things that I usually like to do. But I have to go to the grocery store and buy food. I have to eat food, which means I can't really stop buying that, right? Now, if I could grow enough of my own food, great. But I don't see that happening anytime soon, based on the fact that I still have a lot of investment and a lot of work to do to be able to actually produce enough food for myself and my family for that to be a reality. But what I will say is that people got to eat no matter what. So no matter how expensive gas is, people can figure something out. But food has to be purchased and has to be consumed. And that is why this is becoming such a big deal. And the fact that food prices have overtaken gas now shows you that Americans are already struggling with food and are now wondering what the heck to do next, okay? So there's a lot more in this article about that. I just wanted to talk about the concept of the new normal of high food prices because I agree that I believe these prices aren't ever going to really change. And the worst thing that can happen, which is likely to happen, is more shrinkflation to where we're going to be buying very small portions of food for the same price that we used to buy the full portion, and we'll think that it feels better just because it costs less than the immediate. We're going to have to make more trips to the grocery store to fill our pantries because of how little food we're actually purchasing when we do. So that is what you're going to see, more shrinkflation, 100%. And that's the only answer the food industry is really going to have for making things less expensive, is by making them smaller and not giving you as much in the package in order to afford to stay affordable. Okay. Now, let's see here. Vincent Boogaloo says insanity. And it is insanity. It's where we're at this point. RLRL, nothing is fun anymore. It's getting less fun, That's why I really enjoy, shooting guns and stuff, because I still feel good about that and I like it. But you know what? That's really expensive too. It just is. It's amazing. So now we have some other things to talk about, because now we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the overseas conflict and some of the escalation happening there. Because, God, we still have to be concerned about that. And I would argue it's still another reason for why we still need things like AR-15s, even if that scenario is so unlikely that we would ever need them for that purpose. Even if there's a 0.01% chance of that ever occurring, that's enough for me to say that that's something we should have access to. Because if that 0.01 happens, we need to do what we got to do, which is right here on this poster, or this painting technically back here, that you all voted on me acquiring for these live streams. So thank you for that, Wolverines. So, Pepper Book Hub asked me, where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? And you know what? Nobody likes Gondor. Let's be honest. Minas Tirith is crap. Moving on. All right. What's happening overseas, and why do we have to pay attention? Because it can turn into something really bad really fast. That's why, and that's why we got to keep talking about it. So let's go over that here quickly. Ukraine war. 6 dying shellings as new assault looms. Okay, new assault looms. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But there's more shellings. Everything keeps moving forward. Here's a map as to what's going on there right now. And we can see that Russian military control is becoming larger and getting further inward to the country and is moving westward. which is concerning for many reasons, because what's further west than Ukraine? That's NATO. Okay, now, that's a very basic overview of what's happening there. But I don't need to get into the nitty-gritty, because if you want that, you know exactly where to get it from at this point in time, I assume. So we also have Russia orders troops to intensify attacks as missiles and shelling blast Ukraine cities. So Russia's now ordering for intensification. So that should remind you that people are still under orders being held back. Okay, this isn't the full force of the Russian military. I don't think so anyway. I can't tell you that for sure because I'm not directly involved with any of it. But I think there's been an underestimation of Russia's military capability based on what they've presented to the rest of the world during this situation. But I think that underestimation is dangerous. And I don't think that we should assume, just because they didn't take over Ukraine in 3 days like we were originally told, that Russia is weak militarily and not something really to worry about. Because I think that's false. So, just reminds you that the intensification is still there and it's moving upward. Okay. Now, what else is going on? So this is a reminder of what we just talked about here in the United States that I want to apply to what's happening over there. Because we can take so many different things from what's happening in this conflict and put them and apply them to what we have going on here in the United States and really get some ideas about the way things are going. So what happened here? Well, Ukraine war. Zelensky suspends security chief and top prosecutor. And now there's been 60 former employees are now working against Ukraine and Russia-occupied territories, and a total of 651 collaboration and treason cases have been opened against law enforcement officials, he added. Okay? This should tell you everything you need to know about if things really go to full-on SHTF in this country. There will be a lot of this happening. There's always collaborators in any war, okay? And we also have the collaboration and treason being perpetrated by people that are in power and authority. So I don't expect to see anything different than this if something happens here in the United States, even if it's solely domestic, right? We've all talked about a possibility of a Civil War II scenario. No one wants to see that happen. Nobody should want to see that happen. Anybody who literally wants that to happen is probably, let's just say, overconfident as to what they should expect during that scenario. But what I will say is that if we find ourselves in an active conflict here in the United States, and if we find ourselves fighting a foreign adversary or domestic adversary, we're going to have collaborators and traitors within our ranks, and we have to be careful about those people because they will exist no matter what. Many of them already exist, and many of them will immediately jump ship in order to save their own skin. And this is another thing that you should keep in mind when it came to that amendment I shared with you earlier in this live stream, right? Isn't it amazing that if the military were to collect evidence against somebody, I don't know, doing something traitorous, that they wouldn't be able to submit it to a court because, you know, luckily we have that amendment in the NDAA 2023. Everything sounds great when you apply it to you and I, okay? But then you realize that its true intention goes a lot further than that. And our military, I assume, would be the ones who would find out who was the collaborators and traitors within our own government or our own bodies of authority based on the fact that their job is counterintelligence and finding who the enemy is. Now, how interesting would it be if there would be a scenario where somebody was caught acting in a treasonous manner and the evidence against them was not allowed to be submitted to court due to some of these amendments that were made by those said people? I understand there's a lot of gray area there. I also understand that there's, you know, military law and then there's martial law. I understand that there's separations based on circumstance. I totally get it. All I'm trying to do is give you something to think about and to keep in mind that what we're seeing over there in Ukraine right now with what's happening to their own, you know, members of government and members of law enforcement, you should see that that's a possibility here as well at any point in time that there's a conflict. And we should expect it. And then we should also try to keep an eye out for what some of these people might be doing in the sense of posturing in order to give themselves as many tools as possible to avoid any kind of prosecution if something like that was to occur. That's just all I wanted to kind of correlate when it came to that. Now, let's see. Jordambi, thank you so much. I did see that the climate activists are targeting SUVs, and that's happening in many cities around the country right now. Look, all I can say is keep your eyes open. You can't live in fear of these people because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep you from wanting to go places and live your life, okay? Keep your eyes open. And man, if I see somebody stabbing tires, I don't care if they're mine or somebody else's. Like, something needs to be said, okay? Or worse comes to worse, call the 911, right? We know, we talked this whole live stream about how that might not save you, right? Okay, slashing tires isn't quite the same as an active shooter. All I'm trying to say is do something. We also can't afford to stand by and just let all this stuff happen to each other all the time. And you see it every single day. Anytime you see these broad daylight attacks on people in places like New York City, where a homeless guy, berates and beats a woman just because he was crazy, everyone around that area is just watching with a cell phone in their hand, videotaping. I don't know why I say that. I was born in the 80s. I guess that's why. But, recording, that's better. It's more acceptable. Recording the situation. Okay? They're not helping. They're not even telling them to stop. The least you could do is say, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, stop. You know how many crimes are prevented by just acknowledging someone and then realizing that they suddenly have a witness and not wanting to expose themselves any more, right, than they already have? A lot of times that actually does the job. Okay? That's how they treat or they teach women to try to avoid being attacked, is by making eye contact with a possible attacker and saying the first words. Because what that does is it throws off their situational awareness. It throws off their plans because that was unplanned. It was a surprise. And now this person has seen their face and verified that they've seen their face. And that can, at least in some cases, keep them from doing what they thought they might do. So we have to do what we can. Okay. Ms. Merch, we talked about the New York City PSA on the last live stream, but my thoughts on it is that it was super elementary. And it's literally just a, hey, don't panic video. And I think that them putting it out is an admission that we're closer to some of those possibilities than we will ever hear about in the mainstream media. So that's just my thoughts. Okay. Now, Camo Patriot says, can't sit back and let evil reign. Exactly. And you know what? It's uncomfortable sometimes, but we can't just let these things happen to each other. Please. We just can't do it. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a little bit more of what's going on over there. Okay. We also have what's happening in Latvia right now. Latvia is trying to reinstate their military conscription. Okay. And they're going to do it for all males and then women who volunteer for it. Okay. They haven't had it in 15 years, but they're considering reinstating it because of how dire the scenario is getting over there. Okay. So 11-month mandatory military service for men aged 18 to 27 from the beginning of 2023. Countries are getting ready. Nobody thinks this Russia thing is just going to go away. It's not going to just go away. Nobody over there thinks that. We try to pretend that because it's not affecting us directly in this moment. We're not getting the direct effects of shelling and missile strikes and anything else regarding that. But the countries over there, they know that this is probably going to escalate and expand. And that is what they're doing. They're getting ready for these things to happen because they think they're going to. So this should tell you one thing is that countries in that region are preparing because they know it's going to get worse. And the other thing it should tell you is that countries, knowing they're outnumbered and outgunned, are likely to reinstate things like conscription service or the draft in order to make sure they have the military-aged men and possibly women in order to try to defend themselves from an invasion. Okay? There's nothing stopping the United States from enacting the draft again. All right? Keep that in mind. They can easily do that at any point in time if things get worse. And right now, the way our military is set up is to fight a single war front. We're no longer set up for two fronts at the same time. That was done during the Obama years, and that has been the doctrine for some time. But what I will say is that if we have to fight two fronts, they're going to find people to fight those two fronts somehow. So this is just another reminder of why we can watch what's going on over there, apply it to here, and get an idea of where we might be heading. Now, what else is going on? Well, we're not that smart, are we? Because there's this thought going on around here that donating money and weapons to Ukraine won't ever have any kind of consequences, right? Why would that cause any problems between us and Russia? Well, you tell me. Russian Foreign Ministry attacks the West for giving Ukrainian forces weapons training. Okay? Now, this content was produced in Russia, right? They want us to make sure we know that. This content is straightforward. They're literally saying what we all already know. The Foreign Ministry on Thursday attacked the United States and Britain for helping train Ukraine's armed forces, calling it part of hybrid warfare being waged by NATO countries against Russia. In a media briefing, spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Washington had provided Ukraine with instructors who are helping Kiev's forces use advanced U.S.-made high-mobility artillery rocket systems, the HIMARS. This was always considered to be an issue that we had to watch out for. The HIMARS systems are targeting places across the Russian border and targeting places like military installations in Crimea, and we're now being blamed for it because we provided those HIMARS systems, okay? Now, these weapons were being widely used by Ukrainian forces, or the weapons being widely used by Ukrainian forces were less advanced than what the HIMARS system is what they're trying to say here. So we gave them an advantage they did not have before. And the U.S. had secretly sent instructors to Ukraine in order to teach them how to use those systems, all right? I don't understand why anyone would think us giving these missile systems to Ukraine and then letting them shoot Russia with them wouldn't have any consequences. We all know it would. Could you imagine? That's like if you were the guy who gave an active shooter an AR-15 and you knew they were a felon and you knew they said they were going to do something terrible and you gave it to them anyway and then don't expect to be blamed for anything that happened. I mean, that's exactly what's happening here. Regardless of how you want to look at it in the sense of a geopolitical spectrum and say, oh, well, this side's the good side and that side's the bad side, or however you feel about it, what I just said is accurate based on what it is. You're an accomplice. And accomplices in this country, when it comes to crimes, get charged for them. So what makes being an accomplice to Ukraine help us at all? And what keeps us safe and guarded from anything Russia might do in the sense of retaliation? Nothing. So don't think that we're not going to experience anything via direct attack from Russia. Okay? Now, let's see here. Lily Bishop says, I'm safe as well. I don't know what you're safe from, but I'm glad you are, okay? Oh, we're talking about the draft. Got it. Secret Squirrel says, I'm safe unless they enact a geriatric draft. You know what? In modern day with drone technology and stuff like that, I mean, you never know. If you're really good at Microsoft's Flight Simulator or something like that, they might come after you. Be careful, all right? Let's see here. Silence says, and those militias are trained by vets. Yeah. And I mean, it's just, we're poking the bear every single day. The longer this thing goes on for, the more the bear is getting poked. Okay. And then we have MX Oldtimer 4 Brap says, a major FF is coming. Okay. Exactly. Like that. That's all it takes is one. And either side could perpetrate it at this point. It won't matter. Because if the goal is escalation, that's all it will do. Okay. Now, William Ashley says the bear is eating someone. There you are. Let's go further. Okay. So this whole escalation is concerning. And we also know now that even Russia admits that they have to reinvent themselves to defeat the West's hybrid war. Okay. And this is from Dmitry Trenin, which is an RIAC member. Okay. Russian International Affairs Council. Right. And basically, he's saying in this article that since 2014, during the invasion of Crimea, the West and Russia have been at odds and have not been necessarily building a good relationship, right? Well, now in this article, a lot of what he describes is the fact that Russia can never go back to being part of this globalization that's happening in the world. Russia is no longer welcome at the table, and our relationship can never go back to being what it was before. So therefore, they are going to have to change a lot of their dynamic in order to meet the current environment that's been created by our response to what they've done. Now, regardless of how you feel about what they've done and our response to it and whether or not you find that to be justifiable doesn't matter, because what they're trying to say here is that Russia is basically being, kicked off the team in many ways, and it's not going to work well for the United States in the long run. And here's a line I wanted to share with you all from it. I can actually speak English. Hold on. The success of this strategy would allow the U.S.-led West to finally resolve the Russia question and create favorable prospects for victory in the confrontation with China. Okay? So what they're saying here is that our strategy is to destroy the Russian economy and remove them from world politics and take them out of the equation in the sense of making decisions that will affect them regardless of whether or not they have a say. And then their thought on that is that it gives us the ability then to have the upper hand and defeat China during our confrontation, which hasn't even started yet, but that they are assuming will occur. So this should tell you a lot. In this article, it's very detailed on how Russia is going to have to change a lot of its strategy and concepts based on what's happening to them and based on what's happening right now. I'll post a link to this whole thing in the chat right now because I found it to be relatively eye-opening and I thought it was worth a read. It just goes to show you, like, we really are in a very trying time right now. Things are very difficult and they're not getting better. And I'm a little bit concerned about the way things are going because let's be honest, we don't have a good way to resolve this. And they are actually correct about the fact that I don't think things can just go back at any point. We're not there and we're not going to be there anytime soon. So what happened just recently? Let's say, I don't know, today? Well, things we don't like to hear that happen a lot. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev warns that Judgment Day will come very fast and hard. Okay, this came out today. Okay. Medvedev said a Western Ukrainian attack on Crimea would see a major retort. Russia illegally annexed the Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea from Ukraine in 2014. Judgment Day come very fast and hard. It will be very difficult to hide, he said. Comments came a day after Ukrainian military intelligence officials said Kiev could hit targets in Crimea with U.S.-made HIMARS missiles. It all comes back to the equipment we're giving the people there that they're then using against Russia. And Russia's not stupid enough to just say, oh, well, technically it's legal and they gave them weapons, but it's not actually them pulling the trigger. So therefore, it's not necessarily an attack from the United States. That is not how they feel about it at all. They're literally pointing the finger right at us and saying, you guys are giving them these missiles and you guys are teaching them how to use them. You guys are attacking us, right? And that's what he's saying here is that if we do anything against Crimea, aka even if Ukraine does using our technology that we gave them, Judgment Day will be on its way. And when they say Judgment Day, I don't think they're referring to conventional weaponry. Do you? I think they have something else in mind. And I think that we're pushing ourselves further and further into what could be a nuclear oblivion scenario every single day. I don't trust it, okay? Talked to a friend today. One of my buddies came by and did some shooting with me, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, if there was a nuclear event, we'd have to plan and strategize for, you know, travel and everything else related to where each one of us is located and making sure families are able to coordinate and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, listen, you know, I live near Minot Air Force Base. Not close enough to be immediately vaporized if it ever was attacked, but I live close enough to where it's a problem if it gets attacked. And that problem separates me from a lot of people in my state based on the fact that it's relatively center and the eastern side of the state has a higher population than the western. That's just all there is to it. So at the end of the day, find ourselves in a very difficult scenario where I have to really actually consider the fact that Minot and many of the missile silos in my area could easily be targeted during some type of Judgment Day scenario based off what Russia's putting out there for everybody else to ingest. So do I think this is likely? I still want to say no. So I think it becomes more likely every single day that we're dealing with this conflict and that America is getting involved with it, regardless of whether or not we have troops on the ground or any of those things that the media likes to say. Us paying for the weapons and training people on the weapons and then having them use those weapons is the same thing. It just is. It's hybrid warfare, just like it was called out as. Okay. We all know that Crimea has been, you know, taken by Russia since 2014. And we all know that Ukraine has a vested interest in wanting to get it back. This is not going well. Okay. So, hopefully, this gives you some things to think about. Desert 1776. Yes, I did see the PSA, and you're right. Just stay inside. No big deal, right? Get inside, get to the middle of the building, and just wait. Wait till we call you. Wait till we put something on TV. because TV will work no problem. I promise. Just wait till somebody tells you you're good. Okay. Let's see. Carl Miller says they would never nuke a vacation hotspot like North Dakota. Yeah. Yeah. The only saving grace I might have out here is that we have the oil resources, which may be worth more than glassing them over. And B, there's the old doctrine and ideology of nuking the Minuteman silos in order to prevent the initial response from them, even though everyone knows that you would be able to see ICBMs launch soon enough to be able to launch the Minuteman silos in response. I don't think that's necessarily up to date anymore. I don't know. What's the point of targeting empty silos, right? And if these missiles are fired, they're going to be responded to by silos emptying. So that might be my only saving grace, but you never know. They have enough nukes to where they can just do them just to be safe anyway. And I don't know how I'm going to handle that very well. I mean, there's not one in my backyard per se, but I'm not really excited about the idea of the fallout and everything else because of them being nearby. But that's where we're at. So look, the fact that I even have to think about that really sucks because think about it. I want everyone to keep this in mind. 3 years ago, as a prepper, I in North Dakota, storing up food, getting ammo, doing my thing, making sure I have access to water and stuff like that, usual prepper stuff. And my thought is, man, I did it. I got away from population. I'm in one of the lowest populated states, right? Less than 1 million people in the whole state. I'm in a rural environment, got some acreage, doing okay, right? Doing good, moving forward and prepping and progressing. Now I'm like, well, I mean, I'm doing a lot better than a lot of people, but when the main threat was a pandemic or unrest, this was the best place ever to be. Now that the main threat might be a nuclear event, I'm not the most excited for being where I am. That's just how it works. You're in Florida, you're probably pretty well off in a lot of ways, but hurricanes, they still happen, right? You're in California, unrest and everything, yeah, it's a problem. So is earthquakes. Everywhere you go has a trade-off and a risk based on what that environment brings to the table. However, being a strategic nuclear target kind of sucks. So I'm just hoping for the best on that one. Okay. Now, South Florida DCL says, or so you think. Yeah, I know. And Abracadabra says Satan 2, North Dakota will be glass. Now, according to my information about some of that stuff, I mean, we're not talking a statewide wiping off of the map when it comes to a Satan 2, but we're talking a regional destruction, which a large portion of the state, yes, you're right. So Satan 2s maybe a different story. But luckily, the more prime targets in this state for where I am are a little further east than me, and the wind travels east, so I'm just hoping for the best. Please let me just hope for the best, okay? Thank you so much for that. Let's see here. Silence says America is also rich in resources. They would destroy it all and hurt themselves. Right, and that's why it's not really necessarily worth doing and why I think there's some hope in the sense that they wouldn't. But I can't say anything for sure anymore because here we are. Let's be honest. What do we even know at this point? You know that there's still the possibility of like a James Bond rogue villain scenario where somebody launches nukes using codes they stole in order to start World War III. Like that is a real thing that could actually happen. If somebody had enough resources and the willingness to do it, that could literally still happen. Okay. The sum of all fears scenario could literally happen. So the fact that that hasn't happened is huge on its own. Factor in everything else going on in the world right now. Wow. I just don't even know what to say. We are Hammer. Thank you so much. Empty silo theory assumes Sleepy Joe is cognizant enough to order the response. Yeah, you're right. I didn't factor that in. What used to be a 20-minute or a 5-minute response time is now a 30-minute or an hour-long response time. That's true. So thanks for that because you made me laugh, and you're probably right. So now I'm a little bit more concerned than I even was before. And then Son Hatchet says the EMPs, right? So, right, I agree. You don't need nukes with the EMPs, but sometimes there's some validity to shock and awe, right? So I think there's some truth to that, at least in the sense of what might be, what they want to accomplish. It might not be about destroying the country. It might be about showing who's boss, right? So here's the thing. All of you are here because you care about trying to be prepared and because you're doing more than the average person. And then there might be one or two of you that are here just to like give me crap about my white hair streak, because I don't, some people still think that's fake. And I like, how do you maintain a white streak of hair for 3 years straight? I mean, clearly none of you like have a wife that dyes their hair or anything like that, because that's not something that just lasts forever, by the way. But that being said, you guys are here because this is what you're concerned about and you want to be prepared for whatever might come. And for that, I applaud you. Fist bump. If you want to punch your camera, feel free. But what I'm trying to say is this is why I do what I do, because people out there are actually willing to do something and move forward. And if it wasn't for other preppers on YouTube and other platforms putting information out there and helping people, then I wouldn't even be a prepper probably, or I wouldn't have the skills or the knowledge or the motivation to do a lot of the things that I've done. And in fact, I mean, let's be honest, I've watched many preppers over the years, and some of them I have at this point surpassed in many ways because I was motivated to do the things that everyone was saying we should do, aka get property, get land, figure out ways to start producing your own food and stuff like that. And like, I'm working on all that now. And yeah, I'm not a farmer yet. I'm not producing my own food quite yet. You know, I can't just jump into that feet first and do it like right away. I still gotta get like a tractor, man. But what I am trying to say is that, yeah, small gardens and stuff, no big deal. And the fact that I am doing these things is because of people on platforms like this one who said that we need to be prepared. Things could happen at any time, and we should do our best to be ready to be self-reliant and not rely on the government or the authority to save us from what may come. And that is exactly what tonight's conversation was about. Don't rely on anybody else to do these things for you. If you're doing that, stop. Everything we've seen in the last few months should tell you that at any point in time, something terrible can happen, and no one's going to be there to protect you or save you, because that phone call is still a phone call away, right? You're not able to just immediately snap your fingers and have somebody there in body armor with a rifle to protect you. No, you're not a politician or a celebrity, so you don't get to do that, right? But don't worry, they're going to take yours away because you're a threat to them. It's not about you. It's not about what's a threat to you. You're a threat to them, so they're going to try to do what they can to eliminate the threat. Not a good thing and not a good feeling, but that's what we're doing. So you guys stay awesome. Do what you got to do. And I want every single one of you to be back here next Monday so we can keep talking about things, okay? And Dave Sickles says, as they say, when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. And I've operated under that mantra for years now, and I expect everyone here to do the same. And you know what? You're not into firearms, or you can't own a gun, or whatever else might be, you know, revolving around that situation for you. Figure out other alternatives, okay? There's other ways to defend yourself. There's other things you can do. Don't be stubborn, but also be realistic about your capabilities. So that being said, in South Florida DCL, yes, China's buying up farmland here. So is Bill Gates. They ain't buying mine, I'll tell you that much, just throwing it out there, okay? But what I'm trying to say is you're all amazing. I hope to see you here next week. We've gotten like an hour and 20 tonight, so this was a good one. We're making it happen. But if you need anything from me, you guys know where to go, magicprepper.com. You guys can jump into the Discord, do some networking, meet some people, try to get, you know, into the state channels to find people in your area. The biggest question I get, especially on my contact forms, which I'll be honest with you guys, I can't return every single email I get. I'm starting to get a little overwhelmed by it. I appreciate all of you reaching out, and I appreciate everybody trying to help and trying to network and figure things out. I'm just one guy, and like I can't live my whole life on emails or I won't get anything done. So thank you for being patient and understanding with that. And I do try to get back to a lot of you. So if I haven't gotten to you in an email, please just send it again, or eventually I'll hopefully get to it. I promise. And then the other thing to keep in mind, I'm trying to get more active on Patreon. I'm starting to get a little more active on Instagram. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, go for it. And if you want to be a patron, there are some perks to it. They're not as good as I'd like them to be yet, but I am working on improving those. And if you want to check us out on Patreon, one thing I can do there that I can't necessarily do because it is a limited crowd scenario is I do direct communication there. And if somebody messages me directly on Patreon, I get back to them. So that's one perk of being on Patreon. If you want to be involved, I guess, financially with what I'm trying to do here and support the channel, you'll have a direct line of communication with me that a lot of people otherwise wouldn't have, just because I have to prioritize those people because they're literally helping to support what I do with their own money, right? So I have some obligations there that I try to meet. Either way, you all are amazing. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you all. And I'll see you again soon, probably in a week.